Welcome to class. I'm Trevor, and I post D&D videos every week, generally on Wednesdays. In this video, I want to talk about my first impressions for the new MCDM book, Kingdoms in Warfare. Now, first impressions is key here. I'm not doing a full book review. I don't even know if I will do a full book review on the channel, but I want to talk about just what I got out of this book from my first couple of read-throughs and from watching some of Matt Colville's videos on his channel, because I think this book is fantastic, like just phenomenal. Even though I will say from the outset that I'm probably not going to use all of this in my campaign sessions, I think the way that this book is laid out and the overall content that is in it is fantastic for most DMs, especially those that like adding homebrew and other layers to their 5th edition games. So I'm going to jump into my first impressions and let's see what this book has in store. Now, Kingdoms in Warfare is broken into 4 sections. The first is Domains and Intrigue. The second is Warfare. The third is Monsters and Magical Items. And the final section that closes out the book is an adventure that uses the rules and kind of shows you how to play with the rules that are included in this book. Before I delve into any of these individual sections, I want to shout out Matt Colville's YouTube channel, because there are, at the time of recording, 2 videos where he goes over the nitty-gritty explanations for some of the systems in this book, and he's mentioned that he's planning on releasing more demos of how the content in this book functions in an actual game. So I want to let my audience know that that is out there, because this video will not cover that. This video is just what this guy thinks of the material that's presented here. So let's get into the first part of the book, Domains and Intrigue. This first part of the book is my favorite, and it's what sold me on picking up my copy. It's broken into Domains and Intrigue. The domains are really what sold me, and I'm curious to see how I'll end up using the Intrigue section, but domains are broken into 2 categories. There are organizations for players and realms for enemies. And essentially they're just, in a way, an additional small pared down character sheet for the group to have, right? So if you think about it, and Colville uses this metaphor in one of his videos that he released, if you think about it as like the Avengers exist as an organization, but each of the superheroes within that organization also exists autonomously as well. And that system, up until the release of this book, did not exist well in 5th edition. And this book does a really, really excellent job of having different kind of organizations. When your party is part of an organization, they individually get powers, but they also get group powers that they can share. And their organization can spy and communicate with the enemy organizations. It's fantastic. Thinking about it and thinking about the intricacies of how this system works are so fascinating to me, and I especially love how it lets players get little bonuses and extra perks and extra things that they can do without it being like feats or magic items or something like that. It is just another layer on top of having a class and a subclass, and it's a layer that kind of intrinsically brings the group together that I've never seen attempted even in Homebrew, and I've never even thought about doing it, but seeing it written and hearing the explanation, it makes perfect sense, and it in a way helps to solve that problem of why is this group working together. It gives them maybe it doesn't give them a reason to be working together, but it gives them a banner to work under, right? They are all part of this adventurers league or criminal syndicate or whatever it is, and that entity now has an existence that is comprised of the individual. It's just so cool. I can't speak highly enough of this section of the book, and I think this, even in isolation, is worth the purchase. But let's get on to the next section. Part 2 of the book is Warfare, and I'm still trying to grok the actual mechanics of this. I'm looking forward to seeing the video of the actual combat as it plays out, and I think they're running demos on the MCDM Discord, but it seems like a mini game in a way, like a game within a game of 5e, where you have an additional map, and the assumption is that the players are fighting the boss while the armies are clashing. And in terms of practical narrative implication of that, just gorgeous, just so beautiful to think of that, because that's how in epic fantasy that's how it works out, right? You had the hobbits delivering the ring and like going to Mordor, but an army was clashing at the same time, and that's really hard to replicate in 5e. This system makes that so much easier, and it's not too many layers beyond like what already exists and like the mechanics that players are used to. Again, the specifics and like the keywords may be a bit of a hurdle initially, but I don't think it's too complicated to grok for most tables. And the additional benefit is that like this is technically playable without 5th edition. You could throw this into another TTRPG. I could see a world where you play this just as a game separately, right? Like as a mini game separate from an RPG experience. And I think that that's just fantastic. Like I never thought of Homebrew that could have a life of its own in that way. And it's fun because it's kind of reverse engineering a game within a game, right? Like I've brought Jenga into my 5e games, or like left, right, center, like the dice games. I brought those things into my 5e games, but I've never created Homebrew that could be brought out. And that's kind of what these Warfare rules do. I really like it. I'm trying to grok the intricacies of it a bit more, and I think it, for my party personally, like my table, I think it might be a bit too much. It might be an added layer that isn't really what their interests are, but I can definitely see why this is interesting and fun for a group to play through. Let's get on to the third section of the book. Part 3 is arguably the most straightforward. It's monsters and magic items. There are the thing that pleases me the most about this is that there are monsters with action-oriented stat blocks. I have sung the praises of this kind of stat block since I saw the video that Colville originally released about this. I have started making my own stat blocks personally in a style that is more similar to this. I absolutely love it. I love seeing something like this being published in a book. It's just gorgeous. I love the magic items that are included as well. There's so much, for both the magic items and the monsters, there's so much complexity, and like they all feel real and rich, and like you could just flip through the monsters and magic items and create a narrative based on just the names and descriptions of these items and of the monsters' abilities, and that's so much fun. That's such a fun space to play in. Like everything feels so thoughtful in the creation, and I love that. And obviously, like because of the book that these things are found in, some of these magic items can benefit you in warfare or give you like the rules are interconnected, but I don't think that they necessarily have to be. And I think some of these things could be a springboard or could be used in a game without these other systems also being in that game. Let's get to the last part of the book, the adventure that's included. So the final part of the book is an adventure that goes through basically how you would run all of these systems. It's an excellent inclusion, especially for people who learn more through like practice in a way. Obviously, I haven't been able to run this adventure, so I'll say that right out the gate. But seeing it in application rather than in theory, I think is really useful. And from like the teacher perspective, it's modeling, right? Like it is illustrating it rather than just talking about it in a theoretical space. And I love that that was included. It helps DMs of all kinds or GMs of all kinds like learn how to incorporate these into their own games, and it gives them a sandbox that they could use to play this in an environment where they know it would work or know the parameters better, right? I'm glad, because the like domains and intrigue and warfare rules are a bit more complex, and I think they're more complex than most of like the normal stuff that's included in 5e. I'm glad that an adventure was included because it lowers the complexity and kind of equalizes things. It brings a sense of equilibrium because you can see how all of this is supposed to work in a world where it does feel natural, which then makes incorporating it into a different world easier. Overall, before I wrap up the first impressions, I do want to say I haven't seen, like, the physical book hasn't arrived yet, but like the PDF of this book is just gorgeous. It's very apparent that a lot of thought and care was put into the creation and layout, and even the prose of this book is really well done. It's an enjoyable book to pick up and just read through in terms of the descriptions of, like I was saying earlier, the items or the narrative bits of flavor that are included to kind of ease you into an explanation that might otherwise be somewhat dry or complex. The art, just the art in general, is so beautiful. And there's so much care put into each and every piece of this. I cannot sing the praises of this book enough. And really, that's it. My first impressions of this book were wholly positive. If there was a little snag, it was just how complex some of the things felt to me. But I think that's a product of reading it, and watching Colville's videos, which I'll link in the iCard, really helped lower the barrier to entry to this, and I can't wait to start rolling it out in some form in my game. I've already mentioned that the warfare rules are not right for my table, but I know for a fact my players would love having an organization that they are all a part of, and having organization, abilities based on that organization. And these concepts I would not have even considered if it weren't for reading through this book and considering these things in this capacity. And I'm so glad that I did. I just wanted to signal boost this book a little bit. I wanted to let my followers know that it existed, and I just can't sing its praises enough. If you have any questions about it or anything like that, drop them in the comments down below. I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability, or we can find out an answer together. But as I always say, be safe. Make smart life choices.